Have you ever walked into a room and, without saying a word, felt the energy of a man who simply commanded the space? He wasn't the most handsome, nor the richest, but he had something others didn't. Presence. Something silent, deep, that said more than any words could express. While most people struggle to be noticed, he doesn't need to make any effort. He doesn't chase, beg, or desire anything. And that's what makes him so powerful now. Have you ever stopped to think about why this happens? What does he have that others don't? The answer is simple, yet complex. He isn't controlled by his desires. I'm not talking about a man without desire, but a man who has mastery over his desire, over his energy. A man who is not guided by impulses, but by conscious choices. He is not at the mercy of his instincts, because he has learned self-mastery. In a world where we are constantly bombarded by stimuli, whether through pornography, social media, or even the need for validation from others, most men live trapped in an invisible destiny. A destiny shaped by these external forces. But there is a solution. There is a path to true inner freedom. What you're about to discover is that when you learn to desexualize your mind, you begin to live intensely, but in a way that doesn't depend on anything outside of you. This is the first step to achieving a desexualized mind, which doesn't mean the absence of desire, but sovereignty over it. A man who possesses this mind doesn't automatically react to the provocations of the world. He observes, he chooses, he acts with awareness. This makes him unpredictable, and as a result, more powerful. In a sea of men who are constantly seeking something, he seeks nothing, and therefore, he receives everything. Now, imagine a man like this, not as an indifferent person, but as someone who chooses his energy, chooses how to position himself in the world without being a slave to the forces that try to control him. It's not about being insensitive or cold. It's about not being governed by your own impulses. Have you ever noticed how some men enter a room and people immediately sense the difference? It's not because of their looks, their money, or their status. It's because of their energy, and this energy doesn't come from seeking approval or validation. It comes from a man who is already whole, who doesn't need to seek outside what he's already found within. So, I ask you, are you ready to stop seeking outside what can only be found within yourself? If you want to understand the power of a man who is not controlled by desire, stay with me until the end, because what you're about to learn could transform the way you see yourself, how you act, and how the world perceives you. And this power doesn't lie in the things you achieve, but in the energy you carry and the presence you emit. Desire, as a vital energy, plays a profound and multifaceted role in every man's life. It shouldn't be seen as something negative or undesirable, but as a natural force that, when controlled, can be transmuted into an immeasurable source of power. In a world where instant gratification is the norm and impulses are constantly stimulated, the man who learns to master his desire becomes a rare figure, a model of self-sufficiency and stability. This is the man with a desexualized mind, one who has learned not to be a slave to his own impulses, who doesn't get swept away by the constant search for pleasure. Carl Jung, in his view of the human psyche, said that when a man doesn't integrate his sexual energy, he ends up being dominated by it. Unintegrated desire becomes compulsion, and instead of being a tool for creation, it turns into a poison that sabotages his own life. Imagine the following situation. A man is a prisoner of his fantasies, uncontrolled impulses, and insatiable desire for pleasure. He surrenders to pornography, compulsive masturbation, and the relentless pursuit of sexual validation. And what happens? He loses the ability to live with presence. His energy is scattered, constantly seeking immediate relief. And this comes at a very high cost. A man's vital energy is drained by these empty pursuits. While he believes he is satisfying himself, he is, in fact, emptying himself. This directly impacts his relationship with the world, and even more so, with women. They feel the absence of power and presence. A man who lives dominated by desire, unable to control his impulses, is predictable. He is no longer a mysterious and enigmatic being. He is always searching, always lacking, always looking for an escape. And the saddest part, he doesn't even realize he's trapped in this cycle. On the other hand, a man who integrates and controls his desire becomes an imposing presence. He is not indifferent to pleasure, but he perceives it as a tool to be used consciously, not as an end, but as a means. He has learned to channel this energy into his creation, his spirituality, his own evolution. The desexualized mind doesn't mean that he disconnects from desire, but that he has learned to control it, to channel it. He observes impulses, but he doesn't act on them. He chooses his actions. He is no longer governed by instinct. This control isn't repression, as many might think. On the contrary, it's a form of liberation. When you learn not to be governed by desire, you become freer. You don't lose yourself in pleasure. You don't lose yourself in the constant search for more. Instead, you become the master of your energy. The desexualized mind is the mind that knows what it wants, knows where it's going, and knows that true satisfaction doesn't lie in instant gratification, but in mastery of the self. But the impact of unintegrated desire goes beyond the personal issue. The man who lives enslaved by his impulses doesn't only sabotage his own energy and focus, but also begins projecting this need onto others. He starts seeing others, especially women, as complete beings, but as tools for satisfying his needs. What, in the end, only perpetuates the cycle of lack and frustration. At a deeper level, this imbalance may create what Jung would call a dysfunctional relationship with the animather, representation of the feminine in a man's unconscious. A man who hasn't integrated his anima, who constantly projects this idealized image onto women, ends up creating a dynamic where the woman is never seen as she truly is. She is only a reflection of his own unrecognized needs, and this creates an emotional distance, an emptiness that, no matter how much he tries to fill with physical pleasure, will never be filled. A man's true power, then, isn't in how he relates to others, but in how he relates to himself. When he learns to master his own desires, he becomes whole. He no longer depends on the approval of others. He doesn't rely on instant pleasure to feel complete. Instead, he carries a stable energy, an energy that comes from within and manifests in the outer world. The desexualized mind is the mind that knows itself deeply. It understands that desire can be a source of creation, not destruction. It knows that desire doesn't need to be erased or suppressed, but consciously integrated, directed, and used to create something greater than the constant search for pleasure. When you master desire, you master your own life. And this is what the world needs most right now. Men who, instead of being dominated by their impulses, choose to live with awareness, focus, and presence. Now that you understand a little more about how desire can affect our life and presence, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had moments when you felt that desire was controlling you more than you were controlling it? How do you deal with the impulses that arise in your daily life? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this and how your journey to balance desire and control has been. And if you have any questions or want to discuss the topic further, feel free to ask. We've explored the impact of unintegrated desire and how it can control us. And now it's time to talk about the path of true transformation, the path of integrating desire and sovereignty over it. This is the point where a man stops being guided by unconscious impulses and begins to govern his own energy, desires, and thoughts. The first thing we need to understand here is that integrating desire doesn't mean repressing it. Desire isn't an enemy to be defeated, but a force to be understood and channeled. Many believe that by trying to control their desires, they're suppressing their true nature. But what really happens is that without the proper understanding, repression only makes the desire stronger, more unsustainable, and more destructive. As we've already discussed, when desire is denied, it transforms into compulsion, and obsession. On the other hand, when it is integrated, desire becomes a powerful tool for transformation, creation, and focus. To integrate desire, the first step is to understand its origin. As Carl Jung says, what you resist persists. In other words, the desire you try to ignore or repress won't disappear. It will continue to manifest in more disguised ways, creating noise in your psyche, distorting your perception. True freedom doesn't come from ignoring or denying desires, but from recognizing them and learning how to channel them in a way that serves your higher goals, not momentary and destructive pleasure. True sovereignty begins when you are able to observe your desires without being consumed by them. It is an act of clarity and mental discipline. When you recognize desire, instead of reacting impulsively to it, you choose how to respond. And this choice is what makes you free. Imagine, for a moment, that you no longer need anything outside of yourself to feel complete. You don't need validation from others, nor the immediate pleasure of pornography, nor the mindless consumption of stimuli. You have everything you need within yourself. And it is in this space of self-sufficiency that true sovereignty is born. With a desexualized mind, you begin to notice the difference between legitimate desire and superficial desire. Legitimate desire comes from a deep, intuitive place. It's aligned with your life's purpose, your growth, your mission. Superficial desire, on the other hand, is impulsive, selfish, and immediate. It pulls you outside of yourself into an empty place where you seek to fill a hole that can never be filled by external things. Integrating desire is learning to listen to that inner voice that knows what is best for you. You learn to understand what truly matters and what is just a fleeting distraction. This doesn't mean living in asceticism or avoiding pleasure, but rather being able to savor life without depending on external stimuli to feel satisfied. Pleasure becomes deeper, more meaningful, and no longer superficial. It is in this process of integration that sovereignty is achieved. The man who is integrated with his desire no longer lives in search of instant pleasure. He knows that true fulfillment comes from the daily construction of a path aligned with his being. He knows that desire is not an end in itself, but a means of self-discovery, a mirror that reveals what needs to be worked on in his psyche, what still needs healing. When desire becomes an ally, not a master, the man becomes capable of acting with coherence. He is no longer swept away by impulses, but acts with intention, direction, and purpose. His presence becomes magnetic because he is at peace with himself. He doesn't need to control, he simply is. Throughout this journey, you may begin to notice subtle but powerful changes. Your energy becomes denser, more focused. Your attention no longer disperses into external stimuli. Your life starts reflecting what you truly value, not what has been imposed by society or external standards. You become more centered, calmer, more secure. The desire that once was an uncontrollable fire now becomes a directed flame, a source of energy that lights your path and the path of others. This is the true power of the desexualized and integrated mind. A man who integrates his desire and becomes sovereign over it doesn't seek approval. He doesn't need anyone to feel complete. He is whole, and this is reflected in everything he does. His presence changes the environment because he isn't asking for anything. He is offering the best of himself. And this is what makes him irresistible. If you're enjoying the content so far and feel that this journey of self-awareness and transformation resonates with you, don't forget to hit like on the video. Your support is crucial for spreading this profound reflection. Let's continue together on this path to true sovereignty. Now that we've explored the path of integration and sovereignty, we come to the crucial point of the process, the defragmentation and reintegration of the psyche. This is a transformative moment where you begin to rebuild who you truly are, both inside and out. Defragmentation, though it may sound like a technical term, refers to the process of reclaiming the parts of yourself that have been lost, denied, or repressed over time. So far, We've seen how the constant search for validation and instant pleasure fragments a man's energy. This happens because the mind and body become slaves to external pressures, pornography, consumption patterns, and even the idealization of sex as an insatiable need. When there is no control, these forces start to control a person's life, creating a deep internal disconnection. The man becomes fragmented, seeking immediate satisfaction while losing focus on what is truly essential and meaningful to him. This is where the concept of defragmentation comes in. A man's true strength lies in being whole, in uniting his various facets and energies coherently. This means looking at the aspects that have been buried, such as repressed desires, unhealed wounds, and even parts of his psyche that he considers inadequate. This defragmentation is essential because by accepting these parts of himself, the man can heal, strengthen, and finally find true inner peace. Reintegration is the key to this process. It goes beyond simply accepting parts of yourself. It's about integrating those parts into your daily life, reconnecting with the totality of your being. This is the turning point where you stop being controlled by fragments of your unconscious and begin living in accordance with your true nature, no longer governed by impulses or deficiencies. Reintegration also means fully accepting sexual desire, but in a mature and balanced form. When desire is repressed, it becomes an uncontrolled and destructive force. But when it is accepted and integrated, it becomes a powerful creative energy, which can be channeled into great achievements and deep purpose. This is the moment when desire stops being something to avoid or fear and becomes a source of power and clarity. The desexualized mind we discussed earlier doesn't mean eliminating desire, but controlling it, directing it, and not allowing it to become the center of your life. But defragmentation is not easy. It requires courage to face parts of yourself that may be uncomfortable or even painful. Facing the shadows of our psyche is an intense but necessary process. It demands deep reflection on the patterns that govern our lives, especially those related to desire and sexuality. The man who seeks true integration must be willing to look at these shadowed parts and accept that they are part of the whole he is. By doing this, he begins to restore an internal balance. He finds a new way to relate to himself, to the world, and to others. The man who undergoes this process is no longer the same. He becomes a stronger, wiser, and more centered version of himself. He no longer seeks to fill an internal void, but is dedicated to creating something greater and more meaningful. This journey of defragmentation and reintegration is also a form of healing, because when the scattered parts of the psyche come together, a man's vital energy strengthens. He begins to live more focused, with clear intention. This is reflected in all areas of his life, especially in his relationships and social interactions. He no longer seeks approval because he has already found full acceptance of himself, and this is something others, especially women, can feel. The man who is in the process of reintegration and defragmentation becomes a solid, stable, and magnetic presence. He no longer needs to seek attention because his energy is clear and strong enough to be perceived naturally. He is whole, and that's what makes his presence transformative. If you've made it this far, know that you're on the right path. Defragmentation and reintegration aren't easy tasks, but they are profoundly liberating. By integrating all aspects of yourself, you become more than a man seeking momentary satisfaction. You become a creator of your own reality, a force of transformation in the world. It's time to look at the practical applications of the power of the desexualized mind. How can we apply this in our daily lives? How can we harness this power to truly transform our lives and become more powerful and centered men? The first step to developing the desexualized mind is learning to control impulses. Modern society teaches us that immediate desire is normal, that we should always follow our impulses without questioning them. However, impulses, especially those related to sexuality, can control us and take us off course. Controlling impulse begins with the practice of pausing and reflecting before acting. This can be as simple as taking a 5-second pause before responding to a stimulus, whether it's a desire to consume pornography, an urge to seek validation on social media, or even an immediate desire for conquest. Every time you feel an impulse for immediate pleasure, breathe deeply and count to 3. Use this moment to ask yourself, what am I really seeking here? What is the real motive behind this desire? This creates space between you and the impulse, allowing you to make a more conscious decision about how to act. One of the greatest powers of a man is how he directs his sexual energy. Sexual desire is a creative force. When it's not channeled, it can become an obsession or compulsion. But when you choose to channel it into creation, into a greater purpose, it becomes a powerful energy that can drive your goals and objectives. Use the energy that was once consumed by sexual desire to dedicate yourself to an important project or goal. If you feel an increase in sexual energy, channel it into your career, a creative project, or even into self-growth. This could involve starting a new practice, like writing, meditation, or dedicating yourself to a new sport. By doing this, you transform the energy from something instinctive and reactive into something constructive and directed. Another extremely effective strategy that can be utilized is the practice of meditation and conscious breathing. When you learn to focus your attention on the present moment and not be controlled by your desires, you begin to gain control over your energy. This creates an internal space where you can observe your thoughts and impulses without being overwhelmed by them. Dedicate 10 to 15 minutes per day to practicing meditation and conscious breathing. Sit in a calm place, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. Whenever a thought or impulse arises, simply observe it without attachment. This doesn't mean repressing the thoughts, but rather letting them pass, allowing your mind to calm and stabilize. Over time, this helps to strengthen your mind and create more clarity and control over your desires. A desexualized mind also requires self-awareness. You should constantly ask yourself, what am I seeking with this desire? Where is it coming from? Often, sexual desires have nothing to do with the other person, but with our need to feel complete, validated, or loved. Recognizing this is an important step toward integrating desire in a healthy way. Start keeping a daily journal where you write about your desires, impulses, and actions throughout the day. Ask yourself, why did I act this way? What was behind this reaction? This helps identify patterns and understand what's going on internally. Over time, you may begin to notice that desires no longer control your actions, but you are able to decide how to act based on clarity and self-control. Conscious abstinence, whether from pornography or any other impulsive behavior, is a powerful tool to slow down the mind and restore control. Often, sexual desire is fueled by the need for immediate relief or an attempt to escape something. When you choose conscious abstinence, you begin to free yourself from compulsion and gain more control over your energy. Try practicing abstinence for a set period. It could be 1 week, 1 month, or longer, depending on what you feel is necessary. During this period, observe what happens with your thoughts and impulses. Do you feel clearer, more focused, more productive? This exercise helps you understand how sexual energy affects your behavior and how much it can be controlled. One of the most powerful aspects of the desexualized mind is the ability to redefine pleasure. Pleasure should not be confused with instant gratification, but with a deeper, more meaningful experience. When you are able to find pleasure in the small things, in authentic relationships, in personal growth, and in achieving your goals, the need for superficial pleasure diminishes. Instead of seeking immediate gratification from external sources, start finding pleasure in your daily accomplishments. This can be as simple as learning a new skill, solving a problem, or connecting genuinely with another person. By redefining pleasure, you empower yourself and no longer allow yourself to be dominated by external pressures. We've reached the end of this video, and it's time to reflect on everything we've discussed. We talked about the mind, how the conscious control of our impulses can transform our energy into something powerful and directed. We discussed the importance of not being enslaved by desires, but integrating them wisely and consciously so that they become a creative force, not a destructive one. Now, it's crucial to understand that this journey isn't easy. We're not talking about simply eliminating desires or resisting pleasure. We're talking about a process of self-mastery, of reconnecting with our essence, of accepting all our facets, including the sexual ones, in a healthy and empowering way. True freedom lies in conscious control. Freedom doesn't mean acting on impulse. It doesn't mean giving in to everything society imposes on us, or responding to immediate pleasure stimuli. On the contrary, true freedom is when you have the power to choose. Choose what to feed, what to nurture, what to cultivate in your life. When you learn to control your desires, you become the master of your own energy. And by mastering your energy, you become immune to distractions, manipulations, and, most importantly, to the limiting beliefs the world imposes. This is not about repression, but transmutation. When you integrate your shadows, when you recognize and accept your deepest parts, you not only become stronger, but begin building a more authentic, centered life. The desexualized mind does not deny desire, but learns to use it as fuel for personal, professional, and spiritual growth. It recognizes that desire is a creative energy, and when well channeled, it can transform your reality in profound and lasting ways. This journey requires courage because, as we've discussed, facing what's in the shadow, confronting our impulses, isn't easy. It's easier to go on autopilot, live reacting, seeking instant gratification, and being consumed by desires. But when you start applying the practices we discussed, when you start observing, reflecting, breathing, and channeling your energy, you begin to notice the subtle but powerful changes happening inside you. Your presence changes. The way you relate to the world and to those around you transforms. You're no longer seeking validation or approval. You no longer need to chase pleasure because you've already found something more valuable. And it's this self-mastery that makes you a more present, more confident, and more magnetic man. It's not about being perfect, but about being whole. And when you are whole, the world around you responds to that. So I want to thank you for watching this far and for dedicating yourself to this journey of self-discovery and transformation. Real change starts from within, and that's why you're here, seeking answers, striving to understand yourself better and your relationship with your desires. If this content has made sense to you and resonates with your soul, I invite you to subscribe to the Neuro Alchemy channel and join this community of men who, just like you, are seeking evolution and self-mastery. Here, we explore deep topics on human behavior, psychology, self-discovery, and most importantly, how we can become more complete versions of ourselves. And of course, don't forget to comment below. We want to hear your opinion and how you've been dealing with your own desires and impulses. Share your experiences, questions, or insights. This is a space for collective learning, where we can all grow and support each other. Don't miss the next video, where we'll continue exploring these topics and offering practical tools for your ongoing evolution. Remember, true transformation doesn't come from external changes, but from the internal journey that each of us chooses to embark on. We're in this together.